Hi, I'm CJ Sorensen, and I've started a new program called CJ's Chat Box. The reason being, I would like to know some of the people here in the village at a deeper, more personal level. Many of the people here have got such interesting lives and experiences to share, and I think they should be shared with the people here that live in the village. So, welcome. Maybe you're one of those people. If so, give me a call. Maybe you'll be my next guest on CJ's Chat Box. Welcome to CJ's Chat Box. Today I'm going to be speaking with Dave Finley, very interesting fellow, and he's got a lot to share with us. One of the things, I met him at billiards. He has a few trophies to share as well. Dave is a retired naval commander. And so we're going to see a few of the photos of a ship that he was on, a couple of ships maybe. But a little bit more before we get into that is I asked Dave if he's a native, and he said, yes. Born in L.A.
I was born in Los Angeles. I was raised in Glendale, graduated from Glendale High School in the class of '52. And then I went to school, college. Graduated from USC, joined the Navy, and spent my first year in Navy schools, and then I reported to my ship, which was a small combatant called a destroyer escort. And I served on the destroyer escort till I was released from active duty, and I joined the reserves, and immediately joined a reserve crew of a destroyer escort. And I'll show you some pictures of these ships. This is the USS Durant, DER 389. It was a picket ship, and we patrolled the Aleutian Islands in the North Pacific. After I got out, I joined the reserves and joined another destroyer escort. She's another Buckley class. And after a couple of years, we were recalled to active duty by President Kennedy, and we were sent to Vietnam.
So before we go any further, I have to cut in here because I do remember a little bit that you were, I do remember you telling me about school.
Right.
That you really weren't a very good student. You didn't really care about going to school.
That's true.
But then when you got into, like, I don't know, 10th, 11th grade, something like that you said, I think a teacher said, oh, you're pretty good at that drafting. And then you got a job part-time kind of working,
well, that's true.
Doing the drafting.
That's all true.
And so it was kind of, to me, you discovering something you didn't even know you had, this love of that. And of course, that led you to go to school and get all these, I mean, you got like three masters and mechanical engineering.
That's all true. Yeah. But yeah, I was kind of a dopey kid in school. I just, you know, I liked to collect rocks. I was what they call a rock hound. I collect minerals and gemstones, and schoolwork was just something that was in my way all the time, and so I just ignored it.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to my senior years, I had not gone on any of these college preparatory courses. I just was taking vocational programs like drafting. And my senior year, you could get a job for half-time, go to school half-time and get a job half-time. And so I got a job as a draftsman at a local company in Burbank that was making aircraft parts. And I was doing that, and the chief engineer of the company asked me about, you know, what I wanted to do. And, you know, I just said,
nothing. Not really. I am not focused.
What do you mean? I collect rocks.
Yeah, exactly.
So he said, well, I can get you into college. And I said, well, gee, that's too late. You know, I've not done anything ready for it. And he said, no, I can do this. And I said, well, I'll talk it over with my dad. And he said, yeah, let's give it a try. And by golly, the guy got me an opening. and within weeks, and I was gone. I went back to a little college called Tri-State College in Angola, Indiana, and it was primarily a little engineering school. It was for a 3-year school because they didn't have courses like history or any of the languages or any of the classes that a normal university
it was basically
would have.
Focused on the engineering.
Just on engineering.
Now, wasn't it maybe it was at that college that you met a friend that was in the Navy, and
Yes,
he said to you something about, if you want to see the world.
Yes, that's my friend Harley Lunke. He lives in the village, and he was a veteran, but he was going back to school on the GI Bill, and he and I were living in the same, they weren't dormitories, they were barracks that were left over from World War II. And we just happened to get into the same barracks, and over time, the teachers would, instructors would announce who got the best grades on the exams. And sometimes it would be Dave Finley, other times it would be Harley Lunke. And finally we decided we better get to know each other and study together. And so, but he left Tri-State early and went to USC, and I graduated from Tri-State. It was a 3-year school, and I graduated in 2 years by taking heavy loads. And so he matriculated to USC, and I followed him.
And you know what is amazing is the fact that he lives in the village. I mean, the fact that you go back that far, and he lives in the village. That's
literally 70 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're still best of friends.
That is amazing. That's a story in itself. But I do know that what I'm impressed by, again, is that how a teacher helped guide you, but the stumbling onto the fact that you were gifted in this. That, getting your degrees at USC and so on, and then kind of accidentally getting exposed to see the world, go in the Navy. And you had mentioned that when you got in the Navy that you actually had, when you became an ensign, that Eisenhower signed for that.
Yes, he signed my commission.
Right.
I had taken interviews because of my standing in my class with Admiral Rickover, who was the father of the nuclear submarines, to go into the nuclear submarines. There was 2 people out of my class that were interviewed. And I told him that I didn't want to live under the water. I wanted sunshine and to see places and go places. And so I asked to get into these small combatants, destroyers and destroyer escorts.
And I know that you'd said that you went to officer candidate school, and that was back in Rhode Island.
Back in Rhode Island.
But there was, because again of your engineering background, that led you into the sonar and then ending up becoming an air controller.
That's all true. Yeah. It wasn't so much that my background led me into it, but it was, they sent me to an air control school, and it was, you got to understand relative motion a lot, because you got several objects moving at one time. You got to kind of keep track of them. But after I joined my ship, we went through underway training, and part of the training was to conduct these air control exercises where fighter planes would come in to attack a bomber, and we would be directing the fighter plane into position for the best attack on a fighter bomber, which were all, at the time, Soviet bombers that would come in through our picket line. And so we had this exercise, and I was terribly seasick. I was seasick for a year, and I carried a bucket with me wherever I went. Even when I was eating, I had to have a bucket next to me.
Our air controller and his bucket.
And so I sat at the radar scope with the bucket in one hand and the microphone in the other, talking to the fighter pilot and directing him to the attack. And it went so well that the naval officer, training officer who was watching us, mentioned to the captain that you were going to be fine. Your ship's going to do well. And so the captain thought that was pretty nice, and he was very favorable to me, and I got a lot of breaks.
Wonderful. One of the things you mentioned when we were chatting one day about the fact that there really is a king. That
yes, that's true. Well, that's what I get to this next picture. This is my first command, and I'm actually driving this ship.
Wow.
And
with no bucket?
No, I get rid of I got rid of the seasickness after about a year, and it never bothered me since. But as part of my command quals, I had to refuel my ship, and so I was driving, and a guy on the tanker took this picture, and he sent it to me.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, well, that was pretty nice.
No. Well, didn't you do, wasn't there some ship that you had to refurbish that was kind of, had been sitting around or something and you had to redo that? Or am I mixing things up?
Well, maybe so, but the first ship I was on, the Durant, she was coming out of mothballs and went through refurbishment at Mare Island, California.
That must be what I was thinking
But they
about.
were expanding the Navy so fast in that era that my ship was loaded with novices, inexperienced people, right out of school. And of all of the crew, a half was had never been to sea before, had never seen a ship before.
Oh my.
And so we had to all learn very, very fast on how to run the ship and keep it safe. But when you get to be commanding officer of the ship, I joined my first ship as an ensign, my second ship as a lieutenant, and then I was a lieutenant commander, and I was the exec of the ship. And we had won the as the best ship in the Navy. Okay. And so I was promoted to commanding officer. And you talk about absolute monarchs.
Yeah.
Commanding officers of ships at sea have enormous responsibility, and they have enormous authorities. So I was the commanding officer of the USS Hooper. She was a late modeled ship built after the war to fight submarines, and fairly new. And
the part that impressed me when you said about being a king, there is such a thing, is the fact that you said you're out there and you're responsible for everything and you know where everything is and what's going on. And then you said as time went on, because of the communication level, that as time went on and communications got better, then it was, what hit us when we were talking about that was like, so then the commander-in-chief is sitting in Washington, D.C.
Then you had to refer everything back for decisions. But in the old days, coming out of World War II, there was a lot of responsibilities. And that gives you an enormous amount of authority.
One of the other things you were talking about was, and again, this may get a little bit political, if you will, but they're all in the past, so I think we can talk about our opinions of this. But when you were talking about the fact that, your ensign was Dwight D. Eisenhower, and then JFK called, and you had to go to active service, because you were on the reserve then, and you didn't necessarily say you didn't want to really join the Navy, but then you called active service. And what JFK had done, now see, I admit that I know nothing about the Vietnam War, other than it was atrocious. But the fact that JFK had seen the way to help them, the South Vietnamese, was to send 5,000 special forces. And that's what he had done, to teach them how to fight. But then, very shortly thereafter, you were out there on a ship and he was assassinated. And then you were in this sea area where you said you got your radar was getting jammed.
Oh, yeah. Well, this was when we were over there. We were sent over to train the fledgling South Vietnamese Navy.
Okay.
We'd given them some ships, older landing ships called LSSLs, and they had 5 of them. We went over to train them in American tactics, and we spent most of our time repairing the ships. I was the electronics officer of my ship and also the electronic countermeasures of my ship. And with this responsibility, I had a team of technicians who would go to these South Vietnamese ships and repair their radars and such. But while we were over there, we had to refuel one day, and the tanker came by, and the seas were really rough, and we just couldn't get the ship alongside because of the heavy seas, and it was too dangerous to try to, get this close to a tanker, and so we moved up into what they call the Gulf of Tonkin to refuel, and we found a quiet spot behind a Chinese island called Hainan Island. If you look at the maps, you can see this. And while we were up there, we noticed that we were being jammed. Our radars were being jammed by somebody on Hainan Island. And so I took our equipment and I found out, what the frequency, the pulse rep rate, the pulse width, all the different attributes of this jamming signal that I could get with the equipment we had. And I sent a report back to Washington that this was happening. And later on, I was the commanding officer of the USS Maddox after she came into the reserve program. And the Maddox was the ship that started the war in Vietnam by getting fired upon by these North Vietnamese PT boats. And if you look at this is me in the wardroom of the USS Maddox, but one of the officers who was there at the time of the battle painted a mural of the Maddox as it was under attack.
Wow.
And there's a little plane, you can't see it, but that's where Johnny McCain was. Who later ran for president.
POW.
He was a POW for a while.
I guess the thing that, because talking about going back because JFK called him, but what he had an idea of how to help, and then when this jamming started, that by that time he had just been assassinated.
He had been assassinated, and Johnson was president.
And Johnson didn't take that kindly and just went.
Well, the first attack, which is represented in that picture, actually occurred. A couple of nights later, it was kind of a stormy night, and they were back up in the Gulf of Tonkin, and they started to get this jamming. And the jamming was very peculiar looking, and they thought that they were actually ships out there that they thought they were detecting that managed to confuse their radarmen into thinking they were being attacked again. And so, although the second battle didn't occur, it was a bunch of confusion, people jumping to different conclusions. They thought they were under attack for a while, and they made a report, and that was the one that Johnson used to start the war. And it was all on a false premise that they were being attacked, when in fact it was all this jamming. And I talked to the radarmen when I was aboard the Maddox about what that jamming looked like, and it was very similar to the report that I'd sent. But this has all happened without any historical reference because as far as history goes, we were never there. There's no reference to our participation anywhere in the history of the Vietnam War.
Wow.
And a lot of people wondered why that was. And a lot of people thought, well, you know, World War II was started by a reserve ship outside of Pearl Harbor. And maybe they didn't want to recognize that we were the first naval unit sent to Vietnam, which was a significant event in the war.
Right. The other thing that I didn't know about, again, because I know nothing about, but you said that, you know, because the French had, you know, occupied Vietnam for so long, and that's where the Catholicism came in, but the people were Buddhists, so therefore you had a religious war going on.
That was true.
Yeah.
And in fact, we interfaced primarily with the French, trained Catholic South Vietnamese, and they were all well educated, very friendly, and so we were quite impressed by their you know, the fact that they were trying to run the country. The fact is that they weren't a majority, and that later came back and caused a lot of grief. But we did discuss at the time what kind of a war were we getting involved in, whether we were looking at an attack from the north, or whether we were looking at a revolutionary war, or a war to consolidate the country, or what we were dealing with. And we had a lot of good discussions about what was going on. Unfortunately, we were following orders, and we did what we were ordered to do.
I think that's the thing that when you said that, you know, the people on the ship were very brilliant Navy, you know, gone to candidates.
We had a wardroom that was spectacular. Every officer of the 12 was promoted to captain in their career. All really, really smart people. Some of the best and the brightest I've seen.
But they asked the question.
But they were asked,
why are we here?
We'd sit in a wardroom and talk about it.
And that the part that again followed suit is the fact that even though you asked the question, and you know, rightly so, was the fact that you obeyed orders, because that's what military do.
That's what we do.
Yeah. So that was kind of important too. Why don't you show us a few more of these pictures, because we got to move on to the rest of your life over here.
Well, I just want to take a picture from Da Nang. When we first went to Da Nang, we couldn't find it on the map, so we had to sit back and ask, where the heck is Da Nang? And they said it was the French town of Touraine. And so we went to Touraine, and it was called Da Nang, and we were on the beach.
Do you keep track of any, or any of your, you know, officers? Have you
There's only one of us left.
Only one.
I mean, me and one other.
One other.
Mr. Captain John Consola. As an engineer in industry, I worked for a company called Libroscope, and we built fire control and sonar equipment for the Navy. And so I was able to take my Navy training to my my job, and my job to the Navy. And so I became an expert in sonar and underwater acoustics, and that served me well. I worked for Libroscope, Hughes Aircraft, and Interstate Electronics, all doing underwater work for the Navy.
Now, wasn't that Hedy Lamarr?
Yeah, well, she...
So did you ever get to meet Hedy Lamarr?
No, she did some frequency hopping techniques that the company that I worked for was very much involved in.
Wow.
And it's now called phase modulation, but in those days they called it frequency modulation. And so anyways, that was taken from a...
Well, why don't you tell us about the sailboat here that you had for 40 years.
I wanted to go over one more thing.
One more, okay. We're not going to stop.
I was the centerfold of a magazine.
Wow. Well, hopefully you're clothed.
And let's see here.
You've definitely had an interesting. There you are.
There I am.
You made it
I
into
worked for a
this-
company that was later taken over by Singer Sewing Machine.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sakes.
we just gotten back from Acapulco, where, by the way, I met Buzz Aldrin.
Oh, you did?
Who was down there with his wife because he just got back from the moon.
Oh, for
And,
heaven's sake. You just bump into the weirdest
I
people,
know,
right?
I know. So anyways, he was down there with his wife taking a vacation. Well, we took the ship down there but anyways,
You made the centerfold.
I made the centerfold.
I am pleased to hear that. Why don't you show me a little bit about your lemon?
And I had it plowed and planted and grew lemons. I had 1,300 lemon trees and down at Rancho, California. It was kind of a hobby ranch in that I never made any money on it, to tell you the truth. But my kids grew up there and they have fond memories of the place because they would get out and run around and have a good time.
Now, you know, we know this was Orange County, which a lot of orange trees, and the orange blossoms were beautiful in the springtime. Does the lemon blossoms have that kind of fragrance?
It's very fragrant.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
That I would enjoy.
When they're blossoming, it's just amazing.
Okay, we're going to move over
So-
to here. Also,
Well, this
one,
was
one more.
one more.
Okay.
This was my last ship, the USS McKean. We took her to Japan,
Okay.
and I just wanted to show you that I was CEO of the Hooper, Maddox, and McKean.
Oh,
So-
and then we're going to be showing some exciting stuff outdoors in a minute, but this is where you started your, well, you
Yeah.
used to do prospecting when you were
Well,
young.
what happened was my brother used to go out to this with his friends to camp. And about 1995, 96, we started to go out to this place. He had made gun parts in his machine shop, and it went bankrupt, and they gave him guns to pay. And so he started to go out to do some shooting, and there was a gold mine not far from where we were camped, and that got me started of looking around for gold. And then it became, you know, going out looking for gold. And we didn't do much shooting after that.
Well, yes, we're going to show what you've done with your prospecting, because I find that so interesting. So we're going to go outside and take a look at that.
Great.
You do a blueprint to try to modify this.
That's right.
And then you got a couple of good friends from from the billiards club.
I got Ken Simonson and Vladimir Maniak to help me. Vladimir's a plumber, and he put in the plumbing, and Ken is a carpenter, and he helped me with the build this thing.
I just think, and those, you had this all blue, you know, in your blueprint so that you knew exactly what you were going to do when you.
I made sketches
Okay.
how I wanted it to be, but over the years, you can see I've got parts that don't measure up evenly.
You have a daughter that lives in Texas and a grandson that does go to school in San Diego, so he may be interested in going with you
Absolutely.
sometime,
Matter of
which
fact,
is.
he's going to inherit this whole mess.
Oh, well, at least that's the thing is so many say now they say, well, my kids and my grandkids are not interested, but you have one that is.
Trevor is waiting to get
Wonderful.
back here and get out and get over this virus that's
Yes.
got everybody locked up.
Yeah, so he can go back to school and then you guys can go. Well, that's so nice that you can pass that down to me. So anyway, thank you so much for being my guest today, sharing your life experiences. It has been wonderful. Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate
We'll
the
probably
chance
they'll probably be standing in line now waiting to go on prospecting hunts with you the next time.
I hope so.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to get out with somebody else, but I only got room for one in the
That's
truck.
true. They'd have to come up with the same idea. Maybe Ken would help them.